"You're nothing without me," my boss smirked, so I got him fired on my last day. "Hi, I'm Milo Bennett, and I'm 33 years old. What happened to me 3 months ago will change how you think about corporate revenge forever. Before I tell you how I turned my resignation into my boss's termination in just 8 hours, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. If you love stories where brilliant employees outsmart corrupt managers using nothing but documentation and perfect timing, this channel is your new addiction. Now let me tell you how one smug comment from my boss became the last words of his career. I was already packing my last box when Clive Arden leaned against my cubicle wall, breath thick with smugness and expensive coffee. "You're nothing without me," he said, tapping my resignation letter with one manicured finger like he was dismissing a child. I smiled, because my plan didn't start tomorrow, it detonated today. At 3:50 p.m., 2 synchronized events would trigger simultaneously. The board would receive my evidence package, and HR would open a sealed whistleblower complaint that legally protected everything I was about to reveal. Clive thought he was watching me leave in defeat. What he was actually watching was the careful execution of 6 months of planning. Every document I'd collected, every conversation I'd recorded, every policy violation I'd witnessed, all leading to this coordinated strike. "Thanks for everything, Clive," I said sweetly. "Really? Everything?" He had no idea that in 4 hours, security would be escorting him out in handcuffs. My name is Milo Bennett, and I'd spent 6 years at Northbridge Systems turning chaos into client wins while Clive turned my work into his promotions. He hogged credit like a greedy child. He dodged blame like a professional politician. He used fear as his primary management tactic, believing intimidation was leadership. But I'd built something here. 3 years ago, when our biggest client nearly walked due to a system failure, I'd worked 72 hours straight to save the relationship. Olivia Kent, our board chair, personally thanked me in writing for extraordinary dedication that saved the company's reputation. Today was my last day by choice, but I refused to leave the house I built to a bully who'd stolen everything from my ideas to my self-respect. My exit memo wasn't an angry rant, it was a precision-crafted roadmap with receipts, timestamps, and enough documented evidence to bury him. The first person holding that roadmap was Olivia Kent, who had trusted me once before when the stakes were high. The memo opened with a story most people never heard. 2 years ago, I rescued a failing client rollout by rebuilding their entire data pipeline overnight while Clive was at a golf tournament. The next morning, Clive presented his brilliant fix to the board using my slides, my code, and my strategy, earning himself a promotion to VP. I stayed quiet because the team needed stability. But quiet had turned me into easy prey. My memo linked those presentation slides to my original timestamps, code repository commits, and calendar invites. Every piece of evidence proved Clive had literally copy-pasted my work and slapped his name on it. But the real bombshell was the internal audit I'd requested that year. The one that mysteriously disappeared from company records after James Corcoran in procurement somehow fast-tracked its administrative review. James, Clive's golf buddy who had an unusual talent for getting approvals through channels that normally took weeks. Guess whose signature was on the audit burial order? I didn't just attach random files to my memo, I threaded them together like a prosecutor building a case. Each link led to a folder containing version histories, approval workflows, and vendor invoices that Clive had rubber-stamped without proper review, often with James's mysterious expedited processing. The invoices were from Vanguard Apex Consulting, a strategic partner that somehow did millions of dollars worth of invisible work. The owner's name was conveniently blacked out in our vendor management system. But finance had left one PDF unredacted in their backup files. The owner was C. Arden Holdings. My memo didn't directly accuse Clive of kickbacks, that would be unprofessional. Instead, it asked the board a simple question: why is our VP approving payments to his own company without disclosure? Questions are so much more powerful than accusations. Questions demand answers. And Clive's answers were about to destroy him. At 10 a.m., I had coffee with Nora Patel from HR for my formal exit interview. I brought a friendly smile, genuine gratitude for my time at the company, and a tiny digital recorder. Any concerns about leadership or management practices, she asked, reading from her standard checklist. I gave her carefully documented patterns: retaliation for questioning decisions, forced weekend work after I flagged compliance risks, and the time Clive told me, "We'll fix the paperwork later," when I raised concerns about a vendor contract. Nora took detailed notes, probably thinking this was routine exit interview feedback. Then I handed her a sealed envelope marked "Protected Disclosure" in bold letters. She frowned. HR people hate that phrase because it triggers legal protections and investigations. Open this at exactly 3:50 p.m., I said calmly. You'll want witnesses when you do. The envelope contained everything. Recordings, emails, policy violations, and a formal whistleblower complaint synchronized with my evidence delivery to the board. No successful coup works without loyal allies, and mine were loyal because I'd protected them when it mattered most. June Park from finance pinged me, ready. She had pulled login records, timecard data, and the complete payment trail to Vanguard Apex Consulting. Aria Bloom in compliance had queued up policy citations beside each "we'll fix it later" decision Clive had made over the years. Devin Cole in engineering had prepared repository diffs showing that Clive's contributions were actually just metadata changes. He'd systematically replaced my name with his on critical projects. We weren't playing dirty. We were playing verifiable. Every piece of evidence was time-stamped, witnessed, and legally obtained. Every allegation was backed by documentation that Clive himself had created. The only messy part would be watching what happened when Clive realized his own paper trail had become his noose. And that James's helpful, expedited approvals had actually created a digital fingerprint of the entire conspiracy. At noon, Clive swaggered into the main office area, clapped his hands twice like a kindergarten teacher, and announced a Victory Town Hall for 4:30 p.m. We're celebrating my team's incredible achievements this quarter, he said, making direct eye contact with me across the room. He expected me to be gone by then, probably crying into a beer somewhere while he took credit for projects I'd managed. Perfect timing. My calendar showed a goodbye coffee scheduled for 4 p.m. What it didn't show was the audit review meeting I'd arranged with the board chair, CFO, and general counsel, conveniently overlapping with Clive's victory parade. One room would have cake and champagne. The other would have consequences and criminal referrals. Both would have cameras recording everything. And by 3:50 p.m., my coordinated evidence strike would have given the board everything they needed to act decisively. Clients were my ace in the hole. I never owned them in any legal sense, but I'd earned their trust through years of solving impossible problems. At 1 p.m., I called Sable Freight, our largest account, and asked to speak with their COO, Elena Ruiz. We'd worked together for 4 years, ever since I'd personally salvaged their data migration when their previous vendor abandoned the project. Elena, I wanted to let you know I'm leaving Northbridge today. The line went silent for a long moment. Does Clive understand a migration protocol that only you designed? She asked carefully. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I forwarded her a detailed timeline for next week's system release with a bright red risk assessment. Proceeding without proper protocol will corrupt all ledger ID mappings. If anyone tries to rush this deployment, I said, you'll see critical errors within minutes of launch. Elena's response was immediate, then I'm dialing into that 4:30 meeting personally. At 2 p.m., building security approached my desk for the standard laptop handoff procedure. I smiled, signed the equipment return form, and ceremoniously closed the lid on device A, my company laptop. What they didn't know was that device B, my personal laptop, contained nothing but my professional portfolio and 2 calendar alarms, crowbar, and evidence delivery. Both were set for 3:50 p.m. sharp. You can't take company data, people always warn departing employees. You also don't have to when you've been officially asked to document policy concerns for internal review. Guess who had made that request in writing 4 months ago? The same person who would receive my comprehensive evidence package in exactly 1 hour and 50 minutes. Clive stopped by my desk at 3:10 p.m., leaned casually against my cubicle wall, and delivered what he thought would be his final psychological blow. Leaving early today, he smirked. You'll be back, you know. People like you always come crawling back. I kept my hands in my pockets, maintaining perfect composure. Check your inbox at 4 o'clock, I said quietly. He rolled his eyes and walked away, probably thinking I was going to send some pathetic farewell email begging for my job back. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a notification, unknown number, voice message transcribed. It was Clive, who had forgotten he was on speaker phone earlier that morning. Delete the old Vanguard invoices before they start sniffing around the billing addresses. My transcription app had caught every word. So had our company's automatic voice retention policy. In 40 minutes, that recording would be Exhibit A in a formal investigation. At 3:30 p.m., Board Chair Olivia Kent walked into the small conference room with the CFO and our General Counsel. I slid my employee badge across the mahogany table. Officially done in 20 minutes, I said. Unofficially, I owe you some clarity about what I've discovered. Olivia looked at me with the same focused attention she'd shown 3 years ago when I'd briefed her on the client crisis I'd resolved. You saved us once before, Milo, she said quietly. I trust your judgment. I didn't posture or pontificate. I simply opened a single presentation slide titled, Pattern, Not Accident. If I'm wrong about what I'm about to show you, I said, you'll know within 5 minutes. I hit play on a carefully assembled montage. Dated approval documents, policy excerpts, signature comparisons, and financial records. The room was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system humming. We reached the vendor analysis slide showing Vanguard Apex Consulting, mysterious payments, invisible deliverables, and ownership records. The CFO's face went pale as he processed the financial implications. Legal zoomed in on the signature comparison overlay. The same distinctive flourish on the letter that appeared on Clive's employment contract, vendor approvals, and company incorporation documents. Are you making a formal allegation? Olivia asked carefully. I'm asking a question, I corrected. If our VP has been approving payments to a company he secretly owns, is that a breach of fiduciary duty? The General Counsel answered before Olivia could speak, yes. And potentially criminal. I checked my watch, 3:49 p.m. In 1 minute, HR will receive a sealed whistleblower complaint that officially timestamps this disclosure. If I suddenly disappear or face retaliation, this doesn't. Olivia looked up sharply. You coordinated legal protection. I coordinated everything. At exactly 3:50 p.m., my phone vibrated with two simultaneous notifications: crowbar delivered successfully, and HR envelope opened, witnesses present. The board, legal department, and HR now had synchronized access to every piece of evidence I'd collected over 6 months. In the adjacent conference room, Clive was dimming the lights for his victory town hall. Someone started playing celebration music. Applause echoed through the walls. Olivia Kent stood up abruptly. "Mr. Bennett, do not leave this building." She stepped into the hallway and spoke 3 names to an assistant I'd never seen before. Within 2 minutes, building security had quietly repositioned throughout the executive floor. Nora's team opened the protected disclosure envelope precisely on schedule in the HR department. And in the town hall, a new browser window suddenly appeared on the main projector, hijacking Clive's celebration slides. The title read, "Conflict of Interest, Real-Time Review." The room went dead silent. Clive blinked at the screen in confusion, then frantically jabbed at his presentation remote. Nothing changed. The projector displayed vendor payment records, signature analyses, and policy violation summaries in clinical detail. "Who did this?" he barked, spinning around to face the audience. Nora entered the room with the head of legal and the CFO trailing behind her. "We need to pause this presentation," she announced in a steady, professional voice. A hand shot up in the audience. It was Elena Ruiz from Sable Freight, patched in via video conference on the main display. "Before you pause anything," Elena said clearly, "can someone explain why our system migration timeline now shows critical risk status and why Milo isn't here to address it?" All heads turned toward the doorway. I stepped into view. "Because I was told to leave," I said calmly. "Until now." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we need to talk about contract stability." I didn't gloat. I didn't grandstand. I simply explained. Calmly and methodically, I laid out the migration risks, the vendor red flags, and the policy violations, all supported by documentation, no emotional adjectives required. Clive tried to interrupt twice. Legal told him to remain seated and silent. "None of this proves criminal intent," he finally snapped, desperation creeping into his voice. Olivia Kent, now standing at the back of the room, raised one hand. "Play the voicemail," she instructed. Nora pressed a button on her phone. Clive's recorded voice filled the room. "Delete the old Vanguard invoices before they start sniffing around the billing addresses." Every face in the room turned to stare at Clive. His face drained of all color. "That's completely out of context," he muttered weakly. "Great," Olivia replied. "We'll get the full context from IT system logs." Clive pivoted to his final desperate strategy, attacking my credibility. "This is obviously a disgruntled ex-employee staging an elaborate tantrum," he declared. "He's walking out the door and trying to light fires on his way out." Olivia Kent faced me directly. "Mr. Bennett, after today, do you intend to continue working for this company?" "No," I answered honestly. I intended to leave quietly until it became unsafe to do so. She nodded once. "In that case, you are now a cooperating witness in a formal investigation." She turned to building security. "Please escort Mr. Arden to conference room C immediately. Do not allow him access to any electronic devices." Clive stood up, his jaw clenched with rage. "You can't do this to me." The general counsel replied without emotion, "We just did." The man who told me I was nothing without him was being escorted away like a common criminal. They separated us for formal questioning, Clive to Conference Room C with Legal Counsel, me to Conference Room B with Internal Audit and IT Security. Devin loaded our code repository history onto a large wall-mounted screen. We watched commit differences play out like a courtroom drama. My original work submitted at 3:12 a.m., followed by Clive's editorial changes at 9:42 a.m., author metadata swapped, technical notes removed, timestamps artificially modified. IT overlaid employee badge access logs. I had been physically present in the building at 3:12 a.m., Clive's badge recorded entry at 9:40 a.m. Systematic metadata forgery, the audit director stated flatly. Finance joined the session with June's comprehensive ledger analysis, 3 separate payments to Vanguard Apex, each timed perfectly after Clive exceeded his quarterly bonus thresholds. And every payment was expedited through James Corcoran's approval pathway, June added. Olivia entered the room without announcement and silently watched the evidence unfold. Then she said, "Bring him in." Clive arrived flanked by 2 expensive lawyers and wearing an expression I'd only seen once before, the exact moment a desperate bluff meets an unforgiving mirror. "Explain Vanguard Apex Consulting," Olivia said without preamble. He launched into corporate word salad, strategic partnerships, agile resource allocation, market efficiency optimization. Legal slid the business ownership documentation across the table. Clive's signature stared back at him in black ink. "It's historical," he stammered. "The company's been dormant for years." The CFO consulted his tablet and replied coolly, "Payment records show transactions as recent as last month." The room held perfectly still. Then Clive's personal phone vibrated loudly against the conference table. He glanced down despite himself. The screen displayed a text message from an unknown number, "Invoices cleared as requested. Same drop location." Olivia Kent saw it. "Please hand over that device immediately." Clive didn't comply. Instead, he lunged toward the conference room door. Building security was faster. Much faster. The phone clattered onto the conference table. Legal opened the message thread under Emergency Corporate Policy Authorization. Screenshots of altered invoices. Restaurant receipt photos. Wire transfer confirmations to C. Arden Holdings. And a pinned voice note, "Split the payments between accounts. Don't leave everything in one place." Clive sagged into his chair like a deflated balloon. "It's not what it looks like," he whispered. Olivia's gaze never wavered. "It looks like systematic self-dealing, falsified work attribution, and attempted evidence destruction." She looked at me. "And it also appears someone tried to force out the one person who could prove it." Clive's voice cracked, "I want to make a deal." Olivia replied without emotion, "You'll get a formal decision." While legal prepared official suspension paperwork, I slipped out to the building terrace with Elena still connected on the conference line. "If they remove Clive permanently, would you consider staying?" she asked. "Your team here is exceptional," I said. "I'll recommend them highly. But I'm leaving regardless." Elena exhaled slowly. "In that case, our contract renewal is contingent on Northbridge adopting your risk management protocol as official company policy." I smiled genuinely for the first time all day. "Put that in writing." Back inside, Nora approached with softer eyes than I'd seen from her all year. "Milo, thank you for doing this properly." "Don't thank me yet," I warned. "He's going to try one more desperate move." As if summoned by my prediction, the building's lights flickered ominously. Devin swore loudly. "Remote wipe protocol just activated. We move." D like a Formula One pit crew under pressure. IT cut network access at the main switch. Internal audit snapped photographs of every whiteboard and documentation wall. Legal seized Clive's company laptop mid-erasure process and yanked the power cord. He pre-programmed this, Devon explained grimly. Dead man switch in case he got caught. My evidence links had already mirrored all critical records to external servers, but the wipe attempt would muddy investigation timelines and potentially scare the board. Then Arya from compliance burst through the door clutching a thick folder. Found it buried in the filing system, Clive's emergency, business transition, plan. The document detailed reassigning 5 of my key team members under a shell management structure at Vanguard Apex starting Monday morning. He was planning to steal the talent, then bill their time back to us as consulting fees, Arya explained. Olivia immediately called security. Lock down the vendor portal access immediately. But the portal access wouldn't lock. Vendor system access failed to revoke because someone had elevated administrative rights that overrode standard security protocols. Devon's eyes narrowed as he pulled up system logs. Check the admin privilege history. One name appeared repeatedly. James Corcoran, who had been using his procurement access to expedite approvals and override security measures for months. Olivia's jaw set with determination. Get James here now. Security returned 2 minutes later with concerning news. He's gone. Left the building an hour ago. He knew, I realized. Clive tipped him off. Olivia speed-dialed someone I didn't recognize. Close all corporate credit card accounts, freeze vendor disbursement approvals, and flag any outbound wire transfers. Execute immediately. She turned to me. Can your team keep the client migration secure if we pull the plug on half their administrative tools? I nodded confidently. If I can lead it personally for 48 hours. Olivia stared at me. You don't work here anymore. Then make me a contractor for 2 days. At 6:05 p.m., the full board convened for an emergency session. Olivia summarized the evidence: systematic self-dealing, attempted data destruction, and an elaborate shell company scheme designed to steal both talent and revenue. Legal recommended immediate termination for cause. The CFO added grimly, and full financial clawback of ill-gotten compensation. Clive's expensive lawyer argued for voluntary resignation to avoid unnecessary reputational damage to all parties. Elena unmuted from the video conference screen. Our renewal decision depends on accountability measures, not public relations management. Silence filled the boardroom. Then Olivia spoke with finality. Mr. Arden, you are terminated for cause, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. We will pursue full legal restitution. Clive stared directly at me, his trademark smirk completely gone. Enjoy being a martyr, Milo, he hissed. I stood calmly. I'm not staying to be anyone's martyr. Olivia raised her hand. Actually, please sit down. There's one more vote to take. We need to vote on interim leadership for the client migration and system stabilization, Olivia explained. We need someone the clients trust implicitly for 48 hours. After that, you can walk away permanently. I glanced through the conference room glass at my team in the hallway, June, Arya, Devon, watching expectantly. They weren't asking me to save the company's reputation. They were asking me to protect the people I'd mentored and the clients I'd served. I'll do it, I said, but with specific conditions: restore my team's proper titles, codify the risk management protocol as official policy, and publish a comprehensive credit log showing who actually performed the work. Olivia nodded without hesitation. All conditions approved unanimously. Building security appeared at the door carrying Clive's personal belongings in a cardboard box. He attempted one final intimidating glare in my direction. I looked past him, toward my team, toward the future, toward the justice I'd carefully orchestrated. We stabilized the client migration by Sunday morning. Elena renewed her contract on Monday with enhanced terms. By Tuesday evening, my 48-hour consulting agreement officially ended. I turned in my temporary badge, embraced my team one final time, and walked out into the cool evening air. Behind me, building security held the main entrance door as Clive, now just another disgraced ex-employee, argued futilely with the receptionist about parking validation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. On my last day, I'd kept my promise to myself. I left the company, and I made sure he did too. The next morning, the board announced new corporate governance policies designed to prevent executive self-dealing. They named it the Bennett Protocol. A quiet legacy that would protect future employees from exactly what I'd endured. James Corcoran was arrested 3 days later trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. Apparently, some people never learn that digital trails are permanent. And Clive? Last I heard, he was explaining to federal investigators how someone earning $200,000 a year had accumulated $2.3 million in offshore accounts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything documented and letting their own greed destroy them. If this story proves anything, it's that documentation beats intimidation every single time. Have you ever had a boss who took credit for your work? Share your story in the comments. This community supports everyone who's been undervalued and overlooked. Smash that like button if you believe corrupt managers should face real consequences. Subscribe and hit the bell for more workplace justice stories where the good guys actually win. Comment your thoughts. I personally respond to every single message. Share this with anyone who's ever been told they're nothing by someone who never earned their position, because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything documented and letting their own actions destroy them.